All right, guys, welcome back to Queens of the Damned, a horror podcast. This week we are doing urban legends. Rachel is going to do one that's a little bit more familiar. I'm going to do one that I always knew as a child, and Nikki is doing one that Rachel and I had never heard of before. So we hope you guys have fun listening. We definitely had fun recording this one, so enjoy.
So a couple of episodes ago, we did our unpopular opinion episode, and we, and by we, I mean mostly Miranda and myself, kind of railed against Halloween 3 and how much we dislike it. But we did ask for any of our listeners, if we had any who were Halloween 3 fans, to please contact us and let us know why they love this movie so much. And we actually did get an email a couple of weeks ago when we released the episode. So I'm sorry to Al, who sent us this very nice email that we did forget to read it on air. But Al said, "Hello, I enjoyed your unpopular opinion episode. If my memory serves me correctly, the reason Halloween 3 is different than the rest of the series is because John Carpenter's original vision for the series was that it would be an anthology series of unrelated movies that all took place around Halloween. I, for one, actually liked Season of the Witch. The reason I enjoyed it was because it was different. Too many slasher movies at the time focused on an almost invincible killer slowly staking his victims. The movie also had balls because it killed a kid in a particularly gruesome fashion. Usually in these movies, kids are supposed to be safe. I also liked how the ending was left open to interpretation because we don't know if Dan was able to get the TV commercial stopped in time. I found Season of the Witch to be a fresh take on the series because it combined some of the occult elements popular culture associates with Halloween with a technological aspect. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Great episode and keep up the good work." So, I have heard before that it was supposed to be an anthology series, and that's where that movie came from, and that's why the main character was watching Halloween on TV in the bar. And I do agree that I like that the movie ends on a cliffhanger. I think that's kind of a fun way to end it, with him just screaming into the phone to cut off the TV signal, and you don't know if they actually do it or not, if the kids die or if they don't. I think that Halloween 3, I think that the points he brings up are valid. I think there's a good movie in there, but it's just not executed well at all, is my opinion. I think it had some good ideas, but there's just so much going on.
I think also it would help if it wasn't part of the Halloween franchise, just because you already have the first two movies that are about the same character, and then all of a sudden you start doing the anthology thing. I don't know, for me that just doesn't work. So if they had just taken the concept and made it into its own movie, I think that would have been fine. And maybe also not called it Season of the Witch.
Yeah, I still don't understand the title because there's no witch in it.
Yeah, that's my biggest qualm with that movie. That's like my biggest thing is like, why is that the title? I need someone to explain it to me.
Right, because it's all about, like, I mean, so it is about, like, pagan stuff, right? But not really witchcraft.
Yeah.
So I don't understand it. But again, I think it had, like, some good ideas. It was just executed horribly, and the acting to me is just awful.
Right.
Nikki, have you seen it?
I am quiet because I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
I haven't seen it.
I didn't think so.
So
I mean, it's definitely, I would say watch it. I don't know if I would say purchase it. I would say watch it once just to complete the series. But I do want to say thank you to Al for his email, and thank you for laying out points other than it doesn't have Michael Myers and that's why people hate it.
Yeah.
Because that's usually what I see people saying, and that's not true. I actually liked,
Right.
I think I even said in my response to him, I would have been interested to see how the anthology series played out, especially considering some of the movies they did end up subsequently releasing are very terrible. So I would have liked to see them do some different ideas. Because Unkillable Michael Myers does get a little bit boring after a while. But they would have had to be better than Halloween 3, which was obviously killed the whole idea for an anthology franchise. It was so bad. But okay, into our main episode.
I decided to kind of stick close to home and then branch out with my urban legend. Just because this is one I heard since I was a kid. Like, kids were talking about it when I was in elementary school, which is kind of weird. Here in Iowa and over in Illinois, we have crybaby bridges. The one that I heard about the most was in a small town called Viola, Iowa. But then I found out there's also one in Monmouth, Monmouth, Illinois, and I think that the stories started to get mixed with the two, at least with the kids I was growing up with, just because we were kids. Just north of Monmouth, Illinois, is a steel bridge that is called the Crybaby Bridge. It's narrow and only one car can cross at a time. And there are actually 3 separate stories that are attached to this bridge. So the first one is probably, I don't want to say the most popular, but I obviously gave it its name. An unwed mother supposedly approached the edge of the bridge with her newborn baby. And because she feared being ostracized from her community, she threw her baby into the river. And legends tell that when you cross the bridge, you hear the sound of a drowning baby. The second one, which is the one that I always heard, was that an elementary school bus full of children drove off the bridge and went into the water. And the children died before the rescuers arrived. They say that if your car breaks down on the bridge, the car will be pulled across by the 13 children's ghosts. And then the third legend is that a group of teenagers struck and killed a fisherman at the edge of the bridge when they were driving, and they say his spirit can be seen around the bridge. That third one I had never heard before. I don't know if you guys had ever heard that one before.
Isn't that the plot of I Know What You Did Last Summer?
Exactly.
No.
That's what I thought. That's what people were saying online. I was like,
Isn't that the hook-handed man though? Like
the hook-handed man. Is that another urban legend?
Yeah, that's where the
Okay.
teenagers are making out in the car and they hear like a scratching and then a
Oh.
mental patient with
Oh.
a hook for a hand or something
Yeah.
escapes.
Yeah.
But I Know What You
Yeah.
Did Last Summer, that wasn't
No, he had like a fish hook.
for some
He didn't have a hook for a hand, but he had like
okay.
he killed somebody I think with a
Okay.
fish hook. But he
Oh,
was
I
a
see, okay.
fisherman. But yeah, that's the plot of I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah. I don't know. Apparently it's a thing, though. So somebody must have seen that movie and they were like, hey, guys. So this bridge in Viola, Iowa is called the Matsell Bridge. And it's similar to the one in Monmouth. So according to legend, a school bus that was sitting on the corner by the bridge was hit by a semi. And the bus crashed into the river and the children all drowned. So just like the Monmouth one. So the car is pushed across the bridge. Again, if you go on the bridge, put your car in neutral, or if your car breaks down, it gets pushed across the bridge. But what's different about this one is that you see handprints on your car. This is the one that I actually heard when I was a kid. And then you also hear voices, footsteps, and people have seen shadow people on the bridge. So those are the two here in, I don't know, proximity to us. There are, so apparently crybaby bridges are like a thing everywhere, and I didn't know that until I started researching this. So I found just a few more. I was not about to write down every single one. But in McAllister, Oklahoma, they have their own crybaby bridge, and legend states that a mother cast several children over the bridge because they were the product of her father's molestation. So on Alderson Road Bridge, locals say you can hear several children crying, and you also see a glowing woman floating over the creek bed. So that one's kind of interesting. And then Chardon Township, Ohio. Oh my god, this one's so funny. Legend states melonheads can be heard screaming on Wisner Road Bridge. So melonheads are small humanoids with large heads who jump out from hiding places and attack people. So legend states that the children screaming are melonheads, who were children burned alive in an orphanage fire not far from the bridge. Yeah!
What? That one's really complicated.
I've heard a cemetery legend, I think. Don't we have a Melonhead cemetery around here somewhere?
I don't know.
It sounds
We
so
might.
like cringy to say that. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't exist, but it sounds like some sort of derogatory
I know.
term or something.
Yeah, it does.
It really does.
And then my last one, I didn't want to go too in depth with this one just because it kind of goes into other episode ideas we've had, but in Beltsville, Massachusetts, locals claim that Beaver Dam Bridge is the home of the infamous Goat Man, who was either an experiment gone awry or a man who just looks like a goat. I don't know how you just look like a goat, but the
You know, you just
as you do. Yeah. The legend states that screams heard on the bridge and the goat man's presence are tied to satanic rituals nearby, so the screaming babies could be babies that were sacrificed during those rituals.
Mm-hmm.
So that one's got a lot going on too.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so those are some different crybaby bridges around the United States. I don't know. I think they're kind of cool. I've never went to the one in Viola. I've always wanted to since I was a kid. But I've just never done it.
I've never gone either, but that's the one that I remember
Yes.
hearing about the most.
Me too. That used to scare the shit out of me when I was a kid.
I remember having friends who went to it and said, like, oh my god, it's so true, it's scary, like, you hear screaming, you hear voices, there were handprints, all this kind of stuff, and then there's other people who were like, literally nothing happened, and some people say, like, the screaming is just like a weird wind thing, and I don't know. I think people have, like, tested it and stuff, trying to figure out, like, what would make the car move, all that fun stuff. I don't know.
It's on a slight incline, apparently.
Oh, is it? That would make sense.
I think so, yeah. No, all I was gonna say is I wonder what it is about the story that makes it so it seems to be like a national thing. Because I have heard that before, or like seen comments online from people saying something about Crybaby Bridge, and they're not talking about the one here.
Yeah. I think that happens
Yeah.
with a lot of urban legends, though.
I think so too.
And I also feel like that screaming sound though can easily be the wind, especially on a bridge. So I would think
And
that
especially if you're already freaked out and you're going there to be scared, and then
Yeah.
you hear this like howling wind. Yeah, I
Yeah.
could see where you would think it was screaming.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I have also heard the handprints are, well, they're already there on your car. So if you pour baby powder on the back, you're gonna see where you've lifted the hatch up, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Right. Okay, so I chose kind of a newer urban legend, but one that I've loved for quite a few years. So I chose Slender Man, which to me is one of the first examples of a digital urban legend and digital folklore. So, Slender Man was created on this forum called Something Awful, which is like a horror, paranormal type forum. And they would have like little competitions and contests, or they do have, I should say, they're still around. So they had a thread where users were creating photoshopped paranormal images. So this one user named Victor Surge, that's his screen name. His real name was Eric Knudsen, I think is how you pronounce it, he submitted 2 black and white photos of children with a tall man in the background wearing a black suit. And unlike the other posters, Knudsen included texts with his photos describing the abduction of the children in the pictures and naming the character as the Slender Man. So we can put the pictures up on the blog for people who haven't seen them. But the first picture is captioned, "We didn't want to go. We didn't want to kill them. But its persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time. 1983, photographer unknown, presumed dead." And then the second caption is, "One of 2 recovered photographs from the Sterling City Library blaze. Notable for being taken the day in which 14 children vanished, and for what is referred to as the Slender Man. Deformities cited as film defects by officials. Fire at library occurred 1 week later. 1986, photographer Mary Thomas, missing since July 13th, 1986. So because of the photos and because he included captions, again, he was the only one to include captions with his pictures, other users in the thread started building on the story and kind of building up this character of the Slender Man. So Knudsen has said that he was inspired by a few things. The Mist by Stephen King, with the creatures with the long limbs.
Oh, I love
and
that
that's
book.
about all that you see, right? He was inspired by things like the Mothman. Mm-hmm. He was inspired by stories by H.P. Lovecraft. The idea of having the Slender Man be faceless was inspired by Silent Hill. Oh. And then he was also inspired by the tall man from Phantasm, which I don't know if you guys have ever seen that.
Yes. These are all
That's
such
right.
great
Miranda,
picks.
you love those movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing about Slender Man is because he was created on the internet and because the creator really didn't give any kind of background for him at all, right? Mm-hmm. The mythology surrounding him is pretty fluid. But there's like a general characteristic. So, generally Slender Man is depicted with long tentacle-like arms, which he can extend, and he uses them to capture the people that he's pursuing. His face is white and featureless. He wears a black suit and tie. He can teleport. And he usually causes something that people call slender sickness, which is when people come in close proximity with him. And this manifests as paranoia, nightmares, delusions, and nosebleeds. So that's one of the ways that you know that he's close by, because your nose starts bleeding. Right? So after this thread got out, and I presume probably made its way onto Reddit, Slender Man kind of took on a life of his own. And people started creating, shows on YouTube, art, video games, stories centered on Slender Man. So the first big Slender Man show, which is how I found out about Slender Man and how I think most people did, is called Marble Hornets. It's on YouTube. If you haven't watched it, it's really good. It's very scary, but it's really, really, really well done. So Marble Hornets established some of the characteristics that I listed before about Slender Man, and others also that have carried over into being part of the Slender Man canon. So these include the idea of proxies, which are people, usually it's young adults or children, who fall under Slender Man's spell and do his bidding. They also established that Slender Man is able to disturb audio and video recordings, and that there is a Slender Man symbol, which is a circle with an X through it. One thing that I really like about Slender Man is that you never find out what happens to the people that he takes. You know, there's no gore, there's no blood and guts. They're just gone. And it's up to you to decide what happened to them, right? Mm-hmm. And another thing that I really like is that no one has ever tried to explain where Slender Man came from, what his motives are. He's just there, right? He's just this evil being, right? So there's been some debate about whether Slender Man is a meme or whether he can qualify as actual folklore because he was invented on the internet. So a lot of media scholars do consider Slender Man to be folklore. So one media scholar, Shira Chess, says that Slender Man is folklore because he fulfills the three main characteristics, which are collectivity, so he was created by a collective rather than a single person. Variability, the story changes depending on the storyteller. And performance, the storyteller's narrative changes to fit the audience. So any of these YouTube shows that people have created about Slender Man, they're usually ongoing series that go on for like years and years. And they interact, it's almost like a live action role play. Right? I don't know if you guys have ever heard of LARPing. Yes. Okay. So it's almost like that. They will interact with the audience. They will leave things around for viewers to find, like in the real world, that like tie into the story. I mean, there's one that has like a YouTube channel, a blog, a Tumblr, probably an Instagram, and they have created these like fake Tumblrs and Instagrams for all of the people in the show. Like, it's incredibly detailed, right? And they will work fan theories into the show. So Slender Man really can be kind of whoever you want him to be. So media scholar Jeff Tolbert accepts Slender Man as folkloric and suggests that it represents a process he calls reverse ostension. So ostension is the process of acting out a folk narrative. According to Tolbert, the Slender Man does the opposite by creating a set of folklore-like narratives where none existed before. It's an iconic figure produced through a collective effort and deliberately modeled after an existing and familiar folklore genre. According to Tolbert, this represents two processes in one. It involves the creation of new objects and new disconnected examples of experience, and it involves the combination of these elements into a body of traditional narratives modeled on existing folklore. Does that make sense?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Again, back to the media scholar Shira Chess. So she describes the Slender Man as a metaphor for helplessness, power differentials, and anonymous forces. She sees parallels between Slender Man and common anxieties about the digital age, such as feelings of constant connectedness and unknown third-party observation. And then, similarly, Ty Van Horn, a writer for this online magazine called The Elm, has suggested that the Slender Man represents modern fear of the unknown. In an age flooded with information, people have become so unaccustomed to ignorance that they now fear what they cannot understand.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I like about it is that there's no other time in history that you could have had a character like this that was so open to interpretation, right? It really is 100% a product of the internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Especially in the way, I guess, that Slender Man has so quickly permeated the cultural consciousness, right?
Yes.
And across the world, everyone's heard of Slender Man. Everyone knows who he is. And most people don't even realize that he got started on, like, a joke contest on a forum.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Really?
People think that he is, like, this really old legend.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it's, like, 10 years old.
I don't think
Yeah.
they're wrong, per se. I see a lot of boogeyman influence in it, of course.
There are.
So I don't think it's an entirely new thing, just conceptually, but the way it came about is so unique.
Exactly. I mean, I think Slender Man is sort of the first big, lasting, digital urban legend, right?
Yeah.
Probably the one that will continue on beyond, you know, it will continue on for quite some time. Obviously, there have been some controversies with Slender Man. I'm sure everyone's heard of the case of these two 12-year-old girls in Wisconsin. In 2014, they stabbed a 12-year-old classmate 19 times. The girls later confessed that they were trying to kill their friend so that they could become proxies for Slender Man. They became convinced that he was real after reading about him online. And when they were arrested by the police, they were attempting to walk a couple of 100 miles to reach what they believed was his mansion so that they could go and serve him. There's a really, really, really good documentary on HBO about it called Beware the Slender Man that gets into what was going on with these girls. I mean, basically it turns out, you know, one of them was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it was like, I can't think of what they call it, folie à or something.
Oh, the folie à deux. It was like a sheer delusion, right?
That's it. Yes. And she was so convinced and so convincing that Slender Man was real that she brought the other girl into her delusion.
Mm-hmm. This reminds me a lot of the Heavenly Creatures murder that you described.
Yeah. Only this girl did not die. This little girl that got stabbed 19 times managed to crawl to the side of the road. Yes. For people listening who haven't heard of it. And so what ended up happening, they don't get into this in the documentary because it was filmed before sentencing was over, but the girl who did not have... So both girls were declared not guilty by reason of insanity. And the girl who did not have schizophrenia was sentenced to 25 years in a mental institution. And the girl who did have schizophrenia, I believe, was sentenced to 40 years in a mental institution. So, you know, that's not the only case. There have been some other cases of assaults linked to Slender Man. People believing that he's real. You know, so it's I mean, to me, it's just an interesting urban legend and interesting in the way that it came about and the way that it so quickly went from a thing on the internet to, like, mainstream movies and mainstream TV and mainstream, you know, video games. There's the Slender Man video game. And, you know, I think there's a Slender Man movie coming out, like a fiction movie.
I can't really...
Or maybe it already did. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
I think it came out and it was like, it was terrible.
That's what I heard, yeah.
I mean, I'm not surprised. But, you know, I also think, you know, that, again, with it being the digital age, I mean, I think that having things like YouTube, and people could get on YouTube and create their own horror shows centered around Slender Man, is something that's really unique. You know, it's something that you don't see with a lot of other urban legends.
I could be way off with this, but, you know, thinking about it being folklore, and I was just wondering if maybe we're lacking that element in our culture now, and that it is transposed over into this, and that's why people are so intense about it, because we're in general lacking it. So when it comes up, it's like a big deal that everyone gets into. I don't know.
It's possible. It's possible. I mean, I think that you can almost see, yeah, I think that's reasonable, because I mean, how often do you sit around and tell those like folklore stories with your family? Well,
we do.
Let me take that back. Let me go back.
I mean,
well, and let me go back and revise it. How many white people sit around and tell those folklore stories with their family?
Well,
right?
I'm an Italian person. So we do.
For sure. Definitely and I'm Polish, so definitely if you're a member of like a white ethnic group, I think you're more likely.
Yeah, definitely.
But still, I think that, well, a lot of people would say white people don't have any culture. So I think that it's definitely more of a cultural thing for people of color.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. I would agree with you that in general we're lacking in folklore. I don't know if it's just turned more into like conspiracy theories or what, but
yeah.
Anyway,
it would be interesting to do a study on like how our modern folklore emerges, like in general, and not just the specific case.
I'm trying to think of another example of like modern folklore.
I feel as if a lot of the time it evolves because of blogs and podcasts and but on the other hand, I think that there's some people who are really interested in objectively presenting the story, so it's kind of like a toss-up for me.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
Did you guys hear about the Momo thing?
Oh my god. Yes, it's incredibly stupid. This is why old people should never be allowed to use the internet.
If that had caught on like Slender Man did, then it would... Yeah, because it reminded me a lot of Slender Man, just...
That's like the blue whale challenge. Do you remember the blue whale challenge? I mean, it's just one of those, like, parents are terrified about what their kids are getting up to and don't necessarily understand the internet as well as they should. Which seems kind of weird because I feel like they're all my age. Like, people could easily be my age and have, like, an 11 or 12-year-old kid.
Oh, yeah.
And have been, like, 20 or 21 and not be a teen parent. Right? So how could they not understand the way the internet works? Which, like, there is fucked up things on YouTube. There are fucked up things put in kids' videos on YouTube. Momo is not one of them. But yeah, no, I definitely agree with you that if that had taken off... I'm trying to look up examples to see if I can find anything.
I think it's more... I mean, that does count as an urban legend, and things like the Tide Pods and all that stuff, that all counts as an urban legend. But as far as one that consistently... The consistent figure is, say, Slender Man, and there's a consistent situation around it, I think it's always a bunch of different things that fall under the same category. Like, one moment it's Tide Pods, the other it's... Well, when I was in school, it was the Cinnamon Challenge, right?
Oh my god. I remember that.
Yes, I do remember the...
Not that they aren't true to varying degrees, but I think, like, that's one legend told over and over again in a different way.
I mean, basically, this article is all just, like, the biggest one is Slender Man. Which is true. I mean, he's really the one that's permeated the culture the most.
I don't know if the clown epidemic would be considered an urban legend or not, because I don't know if clowns were actually...
But that was really happening. See, I thought that was something where one guy did it, and then other people started doing it to creep people out.
There's a great episode of American Hysteria on that. It's a podcast about urban legends and the cultural stuff behind them. And she talks about when did this start and what were the different cases and how true is it and all that stuff. So
all I know is when I worked at FedEx, we got like an emergency security alert that we had to print and read to our team members that was titled Clown Activity. And I printed it out, and I had one team member at the time, Rakara, and we sat there and we were like crying. We were laughing so hard. We're like, this is the stupidest shit I've ever seen in my life. We were and we were both like, listen, if someone comes in here wearing a fucking clown mask, we're gonna be like, just take the money out of the register, I'm gonna leave.
Yeah.
You do what you want.
Yeah.
We're gonna go.
I remember everybody like freaking out at Stephen King too, because it was right around the time that they had announced the new It movie. And everybody was, like, tweeting at him and freaking out at him and being like, what are you doing? Like, is this a publicity thing? Like, why are you doing this? And all that kind of stuff. And so many times he had to be like, it's not me.
Well, it wouldn't be him anyway. It would have been the people who made the movie and the production company.
Yeah.
So I don't know why people are tweeting at him.
But yeah, anyway, that's Slender Man. I highly, highly, highly recommend watching Marble Hornets on Netflix. I believe even Stephen King, speaking of, recommended it. I think he said it was his favorite modern horror movie.
Huh. Cool.
Yeah. I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. And it's very well done. And they clearly made it for, like, no money, just being completely creative, which I really appreciate.
I chose another bridge story, which I find really interesting. This is the story of Bunnyman Bridge. Has anyone heard of this one?
Mm-mm.
I sure did.
Oh, God.
I'm just picturing, like, the kid in the bunny costume from A Christmas Story.
You're not entirely
Sci-Fi
wrong.
made a horror movie around Easter one year called Bunny Man, and it was just a dude in, like, a pink bunny costume that was really dirty.
Amazing.
Yes.
Okay. There is a low-budget horror franchise based on this legend, so that might be what you saw. There are 4 movies. So this, I'll just tell you the legend first, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into it. So this takes place in Fairfax County, West Virginia, and the legend goes that in 1903 or 1904, there was an insane asylum in that town. And the residents of the town were not happy that there was an asylum there, so they got together and they made a petition to have a prison built, I believe, or to have the inmates moved to a prison. Of course, they round up all the inmates and they put them on a bus. And on the drive over there, what do you know? The bus crashes and all the inmates escape. And they find everyone except 2 inmates. And there are specific names for these, which is really interesting. The bunny man would be Douglas Griffin, I believe, and I can't remember the name of the person who he then was supposed to have killed in those woods. They started searching for him, and it took months and months and months. And eventually, they started finding the corpses of mutilated rabbits that he had apparently been living on, strewn in the woods, some of them hung up on the bridge. You'll hear different versions of this story. And I don't know if there's, like, one version of it is that he hung himself on the bridge or something, and then one version is that, like, they never found him, and then a couple years later, some kids were, of course, at midnight on Halloween night, were playing down by that bridge, in the woods, and they were mutilated and hung up on the bridge by the Bunny Man. And there are several accounts of when he appears, there's a white light, like it's his soul, like he has died or something in those woods. And the creepiest accounts that I found were that he could actually hurt you without touching you, per se. So there's an account of a girl who said she was standing in the tunnel of the bridge, and all of a sudden she sees this white light. And she starts being split from her ribs down to her stomach without anyone touching her, like gutted like a rabbit. And as soon as she steps out of the tunnel, it stops. And I think that's one of the most frightening things I've probably ever heard. I don't know why exactly. But usually it's like the guy jumps out and he kills you, right? But like...
Right.
Just standing there? Anyway, so the legend is that if you go there on Halloween night, the Bunny Man will kill you and string you up on that bridge. There have been a lot of problems in the area because this bridge is like one of those really enclosed stone tunnels, and it's a railway bridge, so a train runs over the top of it, and people have been putting themselves in really bad danger going up on top of the railroad tracks. There was a website that was actually made to explain to people why the hell you shouldn't do that, which, like, if they're gonna do it anyway, you think they're gonna read the website. I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, so what I found interesting was that I found this article called The Bunny Man Unmasked, The Real-Life Origins of an Urban Legend. And it is by this man named Brian A. Conley. It was written in the early 2000s, who is a historian/archivist in West Virginia. And he goes through this study of how he found out whether or not the Bunny Man was real, or to what extent he found out it was real. And for me, this was really interesting because it gives you a real... words are failing me, I'm sorry. Gives you a real sense of how an archivist works and how they do their research, which I think is super interesting. And I remember when I interned in special collections, they would get like a couple requests a week of like, my house is haunted, I need you to like check out what went on there. So this is kind of similar to that. And special collections librarians actually deal with this stuff from day to day. So this is his story about how he went about it and what he found. And so he's pretty sure that the legend started in 1970-ish, that it's actually not as old as 1903 or 1904, but the first mention of it is around about 40 years ago now. 40? 50. God. 50 years ago. So as time went on, this myth kind of grew, and at first the Bunny Man wasn't a murderer, but then by the 80s he was like a full-blown murderer with lots of murders under his belt. And so what he wanted to do once this came to his attention was search for local murders. And the way this came to his attention was one day in 1992, a woman came in and said, I remember these murders of these two kids that were hung from this bridge. And something in his memory was like, oh, that sounds really familiar to me. But she didn't mention the Bunny Man, so he was looking through and trying to find these murders, and of course they weren't there at all. But he decides to let it go, and all of a sudden he keeps getting requests about the Bunny Man. Is the Bunny Man real? And he said he was tired of just saying, I don't know. So he went and tried to find out. And he said because the Bunny Man was a murderer, obviously he looked at the local murders, because this whole thing about the insane asylum and the prison, there's never been an asylum in that county, and that prison didn't come into existence until 1910. So he had nothing to go on there. So he dug up about 550 accounts of murders, pared that down to just murders of children and ones that weren't like your quote-unquote run-of-the-mill domestic murders. And he did this by checking the newspaper archive that had been put together by a lot of wonderful librarians. And he focused on 3 cases that could have possibly been related to the Bunny Man, but they were really sad, and I won't go through them. It turns out that the husband did it in most of them, right? One includes a woman who got in a fight with her husband, who they were stuck in their car in the mud, and she walked away, apparently, and never was seen again. Until they were looking for her body, and they found, I guess they couldn't find her body at first, but then they realized the ground was really soft where they were standing. And then, so they dug up her and I think it was her baby. But none of this had anything to do with the Bunny Man. So he's still going, this thing is absolutely not true. It's totally unsubstantiated. But then he finds a paper written by an undergrad about the Bunny Man in 1973. And she was doing some sort of analysis of this folklore and was analyzing something like 57 cases, 57 different versions of this story. So she was interviewing all these town members. And she mentions a newspaper article in the Washington Post about a man who attacked a couple who were parked in a car next to that bridge, kind of close to the bridge. He accused them of trespassing, and then he threw a hatchet through the right passenger window. And they didn't say he was dressed as a bunny, but that he potentially could have had something white on his head, like a KKK hood or something, which for me is even more terrifying. Yeah. I don't know why. Yeah. Anyway, this definitely did happen. He was able to reach out to the people and actually to the aunt that helped them after the incident, and she says she remembers picking the glass out of the girl's hair because she was in the passenger seat. So this Bunny Man thing takes off in the newspaper, and a couple weeks later he's seen again, and he's seen very near that spot on a porch by this guy. I'm trying to see. I'm trying to find his name. This guy named Paul Phillips. So he sees this man in a bunny suit with an axe on the porch, and he starts talking to him. I don't know why. He said, I started talking to him, and that's when he started chopping. And he was hacking through one of the posts, like the roof supports on the porch, and he was accusing him of trespassing. He said, all you people trespass around here. If you don't get out of here, I'm going to bust you on the head. And he went to call the police, of course, but by the time that they came back, he was gone. So this also actually happened. We don't know if it was a copycat of the first one or if it was the same guy, but both of them actually mentioned trespassing. So this archivist went to substantiate these accounts and found the investigation report relating to that vandalism incident, and that apparently 6 officers responded to this address for, quote, a subject dressed as a rabbit with an axe. So very specific. It's definitely him. And they said couldn't find him, and the case was turned over to this guy named W.L. Johnson, who was part of the Criminal Investigation Bureau. And on, what do you know it, Halloween, a guy gets a call, and the guy claims to be the Axeman, and he says, you have been messing up my property by dumping tree stumps, limbs, and brush, and other things. And he further stated, you can make everything right by meeting me tonight and talking about the situation. And they set up a stakeout for him, but he was never caught. So that was kind of the last real substantiated encounter with the Bunny Man that happened. What this guy basically got from all of this was that there was a young man in this area that was extremely upset about it being developed, because before it was mostly forest and a few houses, and then there were housing additions being added and all that stuff. And so this might have caused him to resort to some desperate measures, I suppose, to scare people away. And then he ends the article by asking what was the significance of the bunny costume. And his quote is, "I am not prepared to even hazard a guess." So we don't know. We have no idea. But weirder things have happened recently. In April of 2018, a man was found reportedly 900 feet from the bridge with upper body mutilations. He was dead. And then it happened again in May. That's a little strange, I guess, especially the upper body mutilations and them not being specific about it. But I kind of looked this up on Google Maps because they mentioned the location, and it's actually not 900 feet from the bridge, if I'm correct. It's about like 5 miles, like 13 minutes by car. Like there's not really a neighborhood around that bridge. It's kind of a woodsy area, and then you take the interstate up and then west, and then there's that neighborhood. So I don't know what's true anymore, to be honest.
Weird.
And I don't know what we're supposed to get out of this. But now you know.
Oh, that's funny. That is weird. I've never heard of the Bunny Man. That's like
I had
ridiculous.
Yeah, I had only heard of that stupid sci-fi movie.
I wonder if that's the same. Now I want to know. Let's see. The Bunny Man. In popular culture. Oh my god. There's a 2011 horror film called Bunny Man. The film spawned 2 sequels, Bunny Man 2 and Bunny Man Vengeance. And the poster for the first one is literally this girl in like booty shorts and a cami covered in blood, and behind her is the silhouette of a bunny holding a chainsaw. That looks like something I would absolutely watch.
So I guess this sort of makes sense, because I remember from being a kid when my friend was really afraid of the Easter Bunny for some reason. I don't know if it was just like a put-on thing, you know, because we all have to have that thing we're scared of. But there's also a site called Sketchy Bunnies, and it's all these pictures.
Oh, yes.
You can go to.
Yep.
It's all these pictures that parents submit, or grown-up kids submit of them with the Easter Bunny.
With these, like, jacked up Easter bunnies.
Yeah, and sometimes they're... Oh, my God. Just go to sketchybunnies.tumblr.com right now and just look at the first picture.
There's also one that's for Santas.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
So... there's a MySpace page for this movie.
Neat. In 2011?
Yeah.
That seems awfully old for MySpace, right? I would absolutely never watch this movie. Maybe I would watch it on a plane, but probably not. I'm just gonna read how it ends. Oh, the main character is named Rachel.
Now you have to watch it.
Of course she is. I guess the point is that sometimes there are these beautiful scholarly analyses of urban legends like Rachel's. And sometimes there's no fucking point whatsoever.
Yep.
Like mine.
Sometimes it's just a guy in a bunny suit.
Or not. Like, why would you make that up, though? That's like the weirdest.
Right, of all things to say he was wearing, why a bunny suit?
They just said he may or may not have had something on his head, like a white hood.
Right. But then the second guy definitely said it was a bunny suit.
Yeah, he did, but we don't know if that was a copycat because it had made it into the paper that it was a bunny suit for the first time, even though the people never said that.
But
or it could be the same thing, but it's so weird that the same the same thing was like, you're trespassing, get off my land. That's so weird.
That's bizarre. I don't know. Where did this take place again?
West Virginia.
Oh my god, that's why.
You got something against West Virginia?
I mean, have you ever been to West Virginia, Miranda?
No.
I mean, you want to talk like... I will say my dad, like half of my dad's family, his dad's side of the family, are all like backwoods, Tennessee, make their own moonshine type people. So when I say that people from West Virginia are a bunch of... Not everyone from West Virginia, but a lot of people from West Virginia are hicks, I guess is a nice way of putting it. It does not surprise me that there would be someone hanging out in a bunny suit and talking about trespassing on their what they felt was their land, even if it wasn't really their land.
Yeah, my research confirms that because I went on this site called Fairfax Underground to research about the recent murders, and those people, every single one of them, was just the most horrible person.
Yeah.
Horrible, racist, awful person. Every one of them.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter at QOTD Podcast, on Facebook at facebook.com/QOTD Podcast, Tumblr at queensofthedamnpodcast.tumblr.com, and YouTube at Queens of the Damn Podcast.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and TuneIn Radio. You can also follow us on our blog, queensofthedamnpodcast.wordpress.com, to find bonus content and extra information on our episodes.
If you would like to donate to our show, you can find us at patreon.com/QOTD podcast, where you can receive special perks as a listener for becoming a monthly patron. If you would like to make a one-time donation, you can send it to QOTDpodcast@gmail.com on PayPal. We'll see you next week.